Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for signing on early. We will begin the webinar in 5 minutes, just giving everybody time to sign on. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. We will begin the presentation in about 1 minute. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2019 Code webinar presented by Nolan Stevens. Nolan is an energy analyst at TRC Energy Services and is on our technical review team for all residential new construction programs, including California Advanced Home Program, also known as CAHP, California Multifamily New Homes Program, also known as CMFNH, the Roseville Advanced Homes Program, RAP, and Smart Homes Program, among a few others. I'd like to thank everyone who took the time today to attend this webinar. So just a couple of housekeeping stuff before we start. If you haven't used GoToWebinar before, we have everyone muted except for the presenters. If you would like to ask us any questions, please type it in the questions portion of your GoToWebinar pop-up. This can be done at any time during the presentation, and I will read them out loud during designated breaks. We will be recording this presentation and posting it to our website for you to reference at any time or to share it with your coworkers who may not have been able to attend today. All right, so the California Advanced Home Program, CAHP and CMFNH are PG&E sponsored ratepayer funded programs. My colleagues and I work for TRC Energy Services, and we implement both these programs on behalf of PG&E. Any inquiries or correspondences with the program will be with us, but PG&E is the source of incentives and the vision behind the program. Now, with that, I'd like to we'd like to launch a couple of polls to see who our audience is today. So the quick poll must be showing on your screen. Please select one that applies. I am an energy consultant, HERS rater, builder or developer, architect, or utility representative. And we'll give our audience a few seconds to log in their poll results. We're getting quite a few in already, so. All right, so it looks like almost half of our audience comprises of energy consultants. We have 25% builders, developers. We have quite a good mix today, looks like, yeah. Nolan. We have HERS raters, architects, utility representatives. So welcome all. And just another one. So do you work on mostly single family, multifamily, or all residential new construction programs? We'd like to just know a little bit more about our audience. We are covering both these components today in our presentation, but just a few more seconds. All right. Okay, so most of our participants work on both single and multifamily projects. That's good to know. So I look forward to what we have today. Over to you, Nolan.
Great, thank you, Pearl. So first up is the agenda, just to give you a little structure. I'm going to go ahead and start with the code change context. This includes history of the code and the 2019 code goals. Then I'll move into more specifically the 2019 energy code. And within this, I'll cover the building standards overview, major changes, and the 2019 code and photovoltaics PV requirements. And lastly, we'll wrap up reviewing the California Advanced Homes Program and California Multifamily New Homes Overview. So for the code change context, right before we get into that, I wanted to let you all know that this webinar is focusing on the 2019 prescriptive code requirements. This is not specifically about the 2019 CAHP or CMFNH programs. We're still currently offering the CAHP and CMFNH programs for the 2016 code program. So how it all started. All started with the Warren-Alquist Act of 1975, and that established the California Energy Commission. To give you a little bit of context of what was happening around this time, we have some examples listed there. We have the Watergate, we have inflation, global recession, OPEC gas shortages, and the end of the Vietnam War. Over on the right, that black vertical line demonstrates the 1975 when the Energy Commission was established. And then this graph is the per capita electricity consumption in California and the US. So we have in the red line, we have the United States, and in the blue line, we have California. And as you can see, after the California Energy Commission was established, the per capita electricity consumption for California, it varies a little bit, but it retains essentially around the same 7,000 kilowatt hours per person per capita, whereas the rest of the United States continues to grow. And so we're not sure what will happen, further to the right of this graph. That's something that we'll go ahead and see as it unfolds. But the main point here is that California has been able to combat increasing energy consumption through policy planning and energy efficiency. And of course, this is directly tied to the California Energy Commission. So between 1975 and today, we can see here in this graph representation of the impact of building standards on home energy use. So you can see that, we're over here in 2018 on the far right, where our regulated loads, so we have our water heating, space cooling, space heating, have been reduced over the past 40 years. But the 2019 standard goals continues to push this forward and push for more energy efficiency. So that brings us to the 2019 standard goals. So there's 5 goals listed here. I'm going to go ahead and just read through them real quick. So the first goal is increasing the building efficiency cost effectively. Second, contribute to the state's greenhouse gas reduction goals. Third, substantially reduce the home's impact on the grid through efficiency and photovoltaics. Fourth, promotes grid harmonization, self-utilization, and PV generation. And the final goal is to provide independent compliant paths for both mixed fuel and all electric homes. And this 5th goal is a significant development in the 2019 code, where we have 2 different baselines, one for mixed fuel, so that includes natural gas and propane, and then all electric homes. Another notable point is that PV is now a prescriptive requirement, but the batteries can be used as a compliance option. And we'll discuss this a little bit more later on about some of the demand response possibilities that give better compliance. So we're moving right along here, and we're going to go into the 2019 Energy Code. The California Advanced Homes Program and the California Multifamily New Homes Program is in the 2018 program year, but when the 2019 code takes effect January 1st, 2020, we will have a new launch detailing updated program requirements in relation to the 2019 code. So here, specifically in the 2019 Energy Code, we can see the energy efficiency increases cycle over cycle. So in that green graphic, you can see that in 2005, 2008, 2013, 2016, 2019 are the different code cycles and the efficiency increases associated with those. So as you can see that 2013 and 2016 code cycles were the most aggressive, I should say, in complying about 30% energy efficiency. And for this upcoming code cycle 2019, we're about 15%. So there are significant changes to the proposed 2019 RES standards. These include the high-performance walls, high-performance attics, high-performance fenestration, QII. QII is now prescriptive, and this is a significant requirement. In CAHP, we've seen that QII typically increases compliance for anywhere from like about 6 to 13% in a 2016 code home. And reaching code will now require several strategies or advanced assemblies to go ahead and hit those same margins that we're seeing in the past code cycle. Another significant change is PV, and here again, batteries are a compliance option, and we'll continue to talk about this. So those changes regarding these different assemblies in QII and PV are reflected in the CBEC Res 2019 software, and we'll discuss an example of PV and the CBEC Res 2019 software later in the webinar. A couple additional changes to the 2019 Energy Code is the target energy design rating. So the EDR is a metric to evaluate code compliance rather than compliance percentage. And for every 2019 code project, there will be a target EDR score that is based on climate zone. Parallel prescriptive paths, this is that 5th goal I mentioned earlier for mixed fuel and all electric homes for different baselines. And one additional change is the separate code requirements for single family and low-rise multifamily. And Parul, please let me know if any questions pop up. I'll pause periodically, but if one pops up, I can address it on that slide.
Great. We don't have any in yet. Just for our audience, please feel free to type in your questions, and we, as Nolan mentioned, we'll take it up periodically. We'll pause for questions.
Okay, great. So we're going to move right along to the single-family 2019 high-performance walls. Here we have some changes to the 2019 code for single-family. This graphic you can see is the residential prescriptive standard and assembly U factors. And you can see the different progressions from the 2013 code, the 2019 code, and the 2016 code. For each climate zone, you could see that between 2013 and 2016, the code diverted between climate zone 6 and 7, which are typically more mild climates, and the more extreme climates, so 1 through 5 and 8 through 16, going from 0.065 U factor to 0.051 in those more extreme climates. And then in the 2019 code, the climate zones are all staying same in terms of how they're bracketed, but the requirements are changing. So for climate zones 1 through 5 and 8 through 16, the U factor went from 0.051 in 2016 code to 0.048 in 2019 code. So this progression, you can see how the code has become more stringent towards less moderate climates by requiring increased insulation values. Below are a couple examples, and there are a variety of options to achieve the required R value. And I'll go ahead and move into that on the following slide. So here we have the U factors of wood framed walls. This is from the JA reference appendices 4.3 walls in the code. And for these wood frame walls, these couple highlighted values, you can see the highlighted 0.065 U factor. So that's the requirement for climate zone 6 and 7 in both 2016 and 2019 code. And reading this graphic, you can see that that 0.067 U factor is achieved through R15 cavity insulation. Working across to the right, you have the 2x4 nominal framing size, further working right with the R4. And then for the 0.051 U factor for 2016 code, as you can see, is using R19 cavity insulation and R5 exterior insulation, continuous insulation, is now being bumped to 0.048 for the 2016 code. So that brings us to the third highlighted value in the table, where the 2016 code is requiring R19 and R5 and being bumped now in the 2019 code to R21 and R5. All right, and previous code cycles have not distinguished between single family and low-rise multifamily walls, and the 2016 code does. This is the first time we've seen this. And so for multifamily, the 2019 high-performance walls, there's no changes from the 2016 code. So the 2016 code remains the same for low-rise multifamily, but we are just seeing the diversion in between single family and multifamily. So here in this table, it's the following U factors, same as 2016 and in 2019, denoted by different colors, but the same U factors. So for single family 2019 high performance attics, there are 3 options. These 3 options were originally noted in the 2016 code, and there have been changes. So for that first option, it has now gone from option A, it is now a reserved option for the high performance attic. So instead of having a prescriptive requirement for this option A, users will be directed to use the performance path for above deck insulation. And then for option B, it's the high performance attic. There is a significant change here with the first line item we see there, the below roof deck R19 for climate zone 4 and 8 through 16. And why this is significant is because the R value for this assembly is with airspace. So this is a change from the 2016 code where for option B, R13 with airspace and R18 without airspace. So here we have in the 2019 code making it R19 and with airspace. Ceiling insulation R30 or R38, that's climate zone specific. Radiant barrier in climate zone 2, 3, 5, 6, and 7. And then duct insulation is either R6 or R8. And that is also climate zone specific. Option C is conditioned. So all the equipment must be located in conditioned spaces, and this is no changes. So the ceiling insulation is still R30 or R38, depending on the climate zone. Radiant barrier is required in all climate zones except for climate zone 1 and climate zone 16. Verified ducts in conditioned space and duct insulation R6.
We just got a question in, Nolan. Can you recap the target energy design rating? I know we will be going over this in greater detail in the following slides, but maybe just briefly right now, and then we can talk about it in detail once we get there.
Yes, absolutely. So later on, we do have a couple slides devoted specifically to kind of break this down for the target energy design rating. There are a couple elements here to talk about, but for the EDR, that's essentially a whole house metric, so that pulls in both regulated and non-regulated loads to go ahead and rate the performance of the house. I hope that satisfies your question for now, and if later on I didn't completely satisfy that, I'm happy to go ahead and revisit that and dive a little bit deeper.
Great, thank you.
Cool. Okay, so I was just on the single family 2019 high performance attics. I'm going to go ahead and move to the multifamily 2019 high performance attics. For the most part, this is the same as single family, although there is one change, and that's in option B. But just to recap, option A moved from just a prescriptive path to a performance path for the above deck insulation. Option B, the major change here is the below roof deck is R13 for climate zone 10 and 16. And again, this is with the airspace. So the R19 is what was stated in the single family. And now here for multifamily, we have the R13 for climate zone 10 and 16, and then R19 for the remaining climate zones. And then the other requirements, ceiling insulation, R30 and R38, climate zone specific, radiant barrier, only in climate zone 2, 3, 5, 6, and 7. And again, the duct insulation, R6 or R8, and that is climate zone specific. And option C remains unchanged, condition attic. Pearl, do we have another question?
We do. So one of our participants, they want to know if does the below roof deck option, which is the option B, path require an airspace now? Is there no longer an option for no airspace?
Yes, so reading through the code, the language that I have seen specifically indicates that the R value is for an assembly with an airspace. So everything I've seen in the code, yes, denotes with an airspace. I have not seen anything other.
Great, yeah, thank you.
Great. Okay, moving along to 2019 high performance fenestration. The 2016 code fenestration prescriptive is a maximum of 0.32 U factor for all the climate zones. Here in this image, you can see that the maximum U factor for the 2019 code has been bumped down. So it went from 0.32 U factor in 2016 to a 0.3 U factor in 2019. And again, this is for all 16 climate zones. For the 2016 code, the SHGC, so the solar heat gain coefficient, is not required in climate zone 1, 3, and 5. 1, 3, and 5 are heating dominated climates where they are typically using their HVAC for heating, and therefore they want to potentially let in more heat into the building to go ahead and offset that load. And the 2016 code requires maximum SHGC of 0.25 in the remaining climate zones, so 2, 4, 6 through 16. And these remaining climate zones are cooling dominated climates. And therefore, we want to limit the amount of heat gained in these houses as to not affect the cooling load and increase overall cooling load. So in total, we can see for the 2019 code fenestration that the maximum U factor is a 0.3 U factor, and the SHGC has been bumped down from the 0.25 in 2016 code to the 0.23 SHGC in the 2019 code. One further minor tweak here is that climate zone 16 for the SHGC requirement was added to the NR list, so it's not required. So here, just below the graphic, there is a brief summary of everything I just kind of covered, and single family and low-rise multifamily do have the same fenestration requirements. And I believe we have another question.
We do. So James wants to know, has the Energy Commission published a prescriptive package table for 2019? Did you see that in the drafts that have been posted?
So they do have it, not in this format. This is an adapted table that I brought, but in the 2019 draft code, they do specifically list out these different fenestration requirements.
So are requirements also listed for the rest of the envelope requirements? The prescriptive package table as a whole that was there for 2016?
Yes, there is a prescriptive package table for both single and multifamily. Yes.
Oh, great. Wonderful. Thank you.
Cool. Okay, great. Thank you for your questions. Greatly appreciate it. So for the another prescriptive change is 2019 Quality Insulation Installation, QII. And this is a significant bump. So I mentioned earlier that in CAHP we've seen QII typically increasing compliance from 6 to 13, anywhere between 6 and 13% in a 2016 code home. And this translates roughly to 1 or 2 delta EDR points compared to a 2016 home not taking credit for QII. So QII is a significant change in the 2019 code. And the addition of this prescriptive requirement will not allow projects to have the same performance flexibility as we've seen in past code cycles. I've seen 2016 code projects installing efficient equipment and QII with some relatively good above code compliance margins. And I expect that with the 2019 code QII prescriptive requirement, that projects will have to utilize more efficiency measures and construction assemblies to reach similar compliance margins. So the QII is now prescriptive for all 16 climate zones. And that second bullet point is a little bit of code language that's pulled over. I want to take a minute and just let everybody know in the audience that the content in this slide is from the code language, but some of the language has been slightly adapted for the purposes of this webinar. So please refer to the code for a complete list of all the requirements and all the details. Are there any other questions regarding building envelope for 2016?
Yes, we just got one more in. Brian wants to know, could you repeat how the protocols have changed for QII since the 2016 code? Maybe just reiterate what we just spoke about in detail.
Yeah, so the specific requirements, I'm not sure if you're referring to testing requirements. I did not dive into that for the purpose of this webinar. But I'm going to go ahead and just read the next bullet point. So for the performance compliance, it requires field verification of QII. The building insulation system shall be verified in accordance with the procedures and the reference residential appendix RA 3.5. And so my recommendation would be to direct you to that appendix for all the field verification protocols needed for QII.
Okay, we just got another one in. Bettina wants to know, will QII in multifamily require exterior insulation?
I believe so, but that I didn't explicitly hunt that out when I was looking through the code language, so that's something I am happy to go ahead and double check and reach back out after this webinar to go ahead and bring you back up to speed and let you know what I found. And just to clarify, it's for low rise only. Okay, great. Thanks again for your questions. So I'm going to go ahead and move forward to the single family 2019 domestic hot water systems. And for the 2016 code, just for a little bit of comparison, the proposed water heating systems were compared against the gas instantaneous water heater. As you can see, it's just option 1 that had no changes in the code. The 2019 code offers separate gas and electric baselines for water heating. And I'll go ahead and get into the electric baselines on the next slide. So there's 5 options. The first 3, I couldn't fit them all in one slide. So the first 3 are for natural gas or propane, and then the following 4 and 5 are for electric. And the prescriptive baseline for the electric water heating is a heat pump water heater, and I have a slide detailing that definition in subsequent slides. So again, please note that the language has been simplified. The system serving individual dwelling units can be one of the following. So the first option that we have is 1 or more gas or propane instantaneous water heaters with an input of 200,000 BTU per hour or less and no storage tank. Second option is a single gas or propane storage type water heater with an input of 75,000 BTU per hour or less and a rated volume of equal to or less than 55 gallons and one of the following. Those 2 options are compact hot water distribution system or a drain water heat recovery system. Third option is single gas or propane storage water heater with an input of 75,000 BTU per hour or less, rated at a volume of more than 55 gallons. So here you can see that option 2 has a small storage system, but you need to have either a compact hot water distribution or a drain water heat recovery system, or you can have the same size of system, but have a larger capacity for the storage tank. So here's 4 and 5, and these are for the baseline, electric baseline for water heating. So option 4, a single heat pump water heater. The storage tank needs to be located in the garage or conditioned space and have one of the following: compact hot water distribution or climate zones 2 through 15. The PV capacity needs to be 0.3 kilowatt DC larger than required, or in climate zone 1 and 6, the PV capacity needs to be 1.1 kilowatt DC larger than required. And finally, the 5th option is a single heat pump water heater meeting NEA Tier 3 or higher. For this option, storage tank needs to be located in the garage or conditioned space, and in addition, climate zones 1 and 16 need compact hot water distribution system or capacity of 0.3 kilowatt DC larger than required. Okay, are there any questions on that? That was a lot of information. Another thing to note is the compact hot water distribution system here in 4A, and then the 2.1 and 2.2, the compact hot water distribution system and drain water heat recovery are new additions that we see in the 2019 code.
Brandon just sent in a comment. He says, can I see 3 again? I believe it's the 3rd bullet on the slide.
Wonderful. So option number 3, single gas propane storage water heater with input of 75,000 BTU per hour or less, rated volume more than 55 gallons. Great. Any other questions?
None so far.
Great. Okay, so we covered single family. We're going to move over into multifamily. So multifamily 2019 domestic hot water systems. These are for systems serving multiple dwelling units. The central water heating system shall include a gas or propane water heating system and recirculation loop system that meets the requirements of section 110.3C2 and 110.3C5. This includes 2 or more separate recirculation loops serving separate dwelling units and is capable of automatically controlling the pump, the recirc pump, based on supply and return temp. There is an exception here. So for multifamily buildings with 8 or fewer units, they can use a single recirculation loop. And in addition to the first 2 requirements, the multifamily hot water system must have a solar water heating system meeting criteria of reference residential appendix R84 with a minimum solar savings fraction of either A or B. I'll go ahead and detail A or B now. A is a minimum solar savings fraction of 0.20 in climate zones 1 through 9, or a minimum solar savings fraction of 0.35 in climate zones 10 through 16. Or option B, a minimum solar savings fraction of 0.15 in climate zones 1 through 9, or a minimum solar savings fraction of 0.30, climate zone 10 through 16. And in addition, a drain water heat recovery system that is field verified as specified. That's great. Any other questions, Bill?
Yes, we have another question about the water heater requirements. Patrick wants to know, can the water heater be located in a basement?
Okay, so it can be located in a basement, but I believe that nobody constructs or can construct a basement in California. Yep. So I don't think that that is.
Typically, we don't see basements being constructed in California. That is true.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, before we move on, sorry, I just got another one in. Okay, sorry. No what is a drain water heat recovery system?
Oh, wonderful. Yes. So drain water heat recovery system. So this is a system. I'm going to use the example just on, say, your shower or shower and bathtub. Basically, what the drain water heat recovery system is it pre-warms the incoming cold water by wrapping coils around the drain. So you're taking a hot shower, the hot water is going down the drain, and the idea is to preheat the cold water that's going into the storage tank or the instantaneous with that hot water that has already been produced. So it's pre-warming cool incoming water with the outgoing hot water.
Great. Thanks for clarifying that. Please let us know if you have any follow-up questions, but I think for now we can move along. We don't have any further questions.
Okay, wonderful. So the next slide is for the electric standard water heating. This is pulled off of the Quick Start Guide from the 2019 CBEC Res software. So when there is an electric or heat pump water heater in the proposed building, the standard design is now a generic heat pump water heater with 2.0 UEF, so uniform energy factor, basic compact distribution, and shower drain heat recovery dependent on the climate zone. So please note that this electric water heating baseline does have a heat pump water heater with the compact distribution and shower drain heat recovery. Do we have any other comments again? No?
None so far.
Wonderful. So here, this is adapted from a different presentation, Countdown to 2020, presented by North State BIA Trade Builder Alliance. I grabbed this slide to go ahead and give a little bit more context and show some examples about the compliance credits for single family 2019 code, a 2,700 square foot home. And here you can kind of see the impact of compact distribution on some of these systems. So we have three columns in this table, and the far left is the system itself. Middle is the water heating compliance credit, so that's one of the regulated loads, and then on the far right we have the overall compliance credit. So you can see that the standard instantaneous gas is a 0.81 UEF, and that's the baseline. So you have the 0% water heating compliance credit and then a 0% overall compliance credit. Then as you have a more efficient system, so a condensing instantaneous gas, 0.92 UEF, you get a water heating compliance credit and an overall compliance credit. And then if you have that more efficient system and you add a compact distribution, again, you get even a little bit more of a bump. Moving on to the electric water heating. So with that baseline that I previously defined in the slide, we have the 2.0 UEF with the basic compact distribution and shower drain heat recovery. And compared to that baseline, we have a couple different systems here. And the biggest takeaway from these comparisons is the difference in between just the system and then adding the compact distribution. So you do see that you get a significant, water heating compliance credit with the addition of compact distribution. Questions?
Yes. So I'll ask the one that directly relates with the slide right now. So Bettina wants us to clarify the definition of compact distribution. If you could just briefly describe what that means.
Yes. So off the top of my head, I do not have the exact requirements. I would refer you to the code for that, but it does have certain amount of feet for pipe length from the domestic hot water system for its distribution. So I do know that they do have very explicit requirements. I did see that in the code, but I didn't commit it to memory and I didn't include it just because that's very detailed information. So I love your inquisitive question, but unfortunately right now, I have to direct you to the code for that.
Okay, thank you. So Jennifer is asking about QII, so that pertains to the previous section.
Okay.
She's asking if QII has any requirements around continuous exterior insulation, and maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Okay. So yes, for that requirement, the rater needs to verify the insulation installed thickness and the R value of the rigid insulation. That's attached to manufacturer specifications, and we are happy to provide a link to CalCerts where the CalCerts has a QII link with more information on that topic.
Yes, and all of these requirements are also enlisted in the reference appendix 3.5 as Nolan stated. So all requirements for cavity as well as continuous insulation should be listed there as well.
Cool. Wonderful. So we're going to keep moving into the 2019 code and photovoltaics PV. So right now in 2016 code, there is a PV compliance credit. So through the performance approach in climate zones 1 through 5 or 8 through 16, with a minimum amount of PV, you can qualify. And with the compliance credit, it depends on climate zone, the conditioned floor area, and you could potentially get as much credit as the high-performance walls and high-performance attics. And you can qualify for this credit even if you're not doing those two construction assemblies. But in the 2019 code, it is not applicable. So the 2016 code PV compliance credit is no longer applicable to the 2019 code. So here comes the sun. The 2019 code is proposed to have prescriptive PV systems. That's why you can't get a credit for it, because it's now prescriptive. How that prescriptive PV system is sized is it's sized to offset the annual kilowatt hours of a mixed fuel home. There are several exceptions. There's 6 of them for this prescriptive requirement, and I'll go ahead and list those in a subsequent slide for everybody. Something to keep in mind here is that community solar can also be used to satisfy this prescriptive requirement. So houses can be served by commission-approved community solar projects that provide equivalent benefits, and the code defines this as energy savings, bill reductions, durability to the home as on-site PV.
Okay, we have a question on for something that you covered in slide 22. Elizabeth wants to know if what you covered. Does the overall compliance credit shown on slide 22 include all other energy features of the project as well?
So I'm not entirely sure because I adapted this from a different presentation, but I believe it does because when you run the model, it takes all of that into account for the overall compliance credit. So based on how it's presented here, I would say yes, but I did not author that, so I'm not 100% sure of what went behind that. Great. So here for the 2019 code prescriptive requirement, all low-rise residential buildings shall have PV system with annual electric output equal to the dwelling units annual electric usage as determined by the equation below. All electric homes are proposed to have the same PV array as a mixed fuel home with similar features. And why this is done is because requiring a much larger PV system on an all-electric home to displace the larger annual kilowatt hours might disincentivize the all-electric home approach. So having those larger annual kilowatt hours is a challenge, and that makes grid harmonization strategies more important. And grid harmonization, that goes back to the demand response opportunities. So here we can go ahead and walk through the sample calculation or example of it. The calculation is, or the equation is listed there in red. The table on the right is the adjustment factors for the conditioned floor area and for the dwelling units. And so you need that to reference. So you have the kilowatt hour, or the kilowatts, excuse me, for the PV is equal to the conditioned floor area times A, which is the adjustment factor from table 150.1C on the right, divided by 1,000 plus the number of dwelling units times the B, which is the dwelling adjustment factor from the same table. So we can walk through a quick little example, assuming you have a 27,000 square foot home in climate zone 1, just to keep it simple so we can all see the numbers up there on the top. We have the 2,700 square feet times A, which is the adjustment factor of 0.793, divided by 1,000 plus the number of dwelling units, so one single family home, times 1.27, which is the adjustment factor for dwelling units. And once you plug all that in, you go ahead and get a PV system rated at 3.4111 kilowatts for this example.
We have another question. Benjamin wants to know what the incentives are for going all electric.
So for the incentives in terms of CAHP and CMFNH, we have not defined that. We will have a separate webinar that will go ahead and launch once the new code launches. But for now, we are just focusing on the 2016 programs for the CMFNH and CAHP programs. So here are all the exceptions for the on-site PV, all 6 of them. So again, here the code language for exceptions and throughout this PowerPoint have been simplified because there is a lot of information in the code. I'm trying to make it easily digestible for everybody. So for these exceptions, there's many exceptions. First one is shading, hills, trees, and adjacent structures. There's also exceptions for buildings with 3 habitable stories at a smaller roof size, or for any dwelling unit plans that were previously approved by planning departments prior to January 1st, 2020. So there's, excuse me, several different exceptions. Just please keep in mind that community solar can be used to satisfy the prescriptive PV requirement. And a noteworthy exception is exception number 6. And this allows for a 25% reduction in the PV size if the PV system is installed in conjunction with a 7.5 kilowatt hour battery storage system. And we'll discuss the prescriptive PV requirements, battery storage shortly, and walk through a little bit of a modeling example. So here comes the EDR. So I know we mentioned this earlier, but here we can dive a little bit deeper into it. So for the energy design rating, a home energy index that uses time-dependent, so TDV, time-dependent valuation of energy, including all end uses in the home to provide a whole house energy efficiency metric. And the EDR score shows how close a home is to the CNE target. So here you can see a list of all the regulated and non-regulated loads that are rolled up into the EDR calculation. Reference home is 2006 IECC compliant home at an EDR of 100, and on the other end of the scale we have a zero energy home at 0. And the 2019 target energy design rating calculates scores for energy efficiency and PV. In addition, it allows for flexibility to achieve compliance. So the EDR is a metric to evaluate code compliance rather than compliance percentage. And in the 2019 code, there's 2 target EDRs, one for efficiency only and another for PV generation. This provides credit for demand response and flexibility, storage, EV integration, and grid harmonization. And this brings me right into our next slide. So for the target EDR and compliance tool, down at the bottom we have a simplified visual of what this calculation entails. So we have the energy efficiency EDR that's based on the 2019 prescriptive measures, and this target can only be met using energy efficiency measures. Then we have the PV EDR, which is the EDR contribution for PV array size to displace the annual kilowatt hours, and then we subtract the PV EDR from the efficiency EDR to get the final target EDR. And for a building to comply to 2019 code standards, 2 criteria are required. The first is that the project meets the proposed efficiency EDR. It must be equal to or smaller than the standard design efficiency EDR. And secondly, the proposed final EDR must be equal to or less than the final standard design EDR target. So the efficiency and final must be equal to or less than the target. The software allows for significant final EDR credit for demand flexibility measures. So this goes into the PV EDR, and these strategies can be independent from the efficiency EDR and can be used to achieve lower EDR scores. The software does have a nifty little tool for the target EDR tool that identifies the PV EDR needed to reach a specific final target EDR. Essentially, if you have plans and already know your energy efficiency EDR and you're trying to reach a final EDR target, you can go ahead and use the software to calculate what the PV EDR needs to be for your project to reach that final EDR that you desire for your project. So here we have a software input screens. So here we're in the energy modeling software at the project level in the EDR and PV tab. Top left, that's just what I was talking about specifying target energy design rating. So that's if you're trying to achieve a specific final EDR, that will calculate the size of the PV array needed to get to that specified final EDR. You can also use the reduced PV requirement that is for those 6 different exceptions if they apply to your project. Here in the circle, we have the PV system scaling. So there's several different options here. These are detailed below. So you have the standard design PV that sets the PV size equal to the same size as the standard design PV. You have the maximum PV for compliance credit. And this is where the software sizes the PV to match the PV size limit. And without a battery, the size is equal to the system that generates the proposed kWh. And with a battery, the size is equal to the system that generates 1.6 times the proposed. And why it allows you to generate more is because you can store that on site in your battery. Finally, we have the use-specific size. This input is useful when the size of the PV system has already been designed and has a known size. You can specify the PV system scaling. It allows the user to specify the scaling at a multiple of the proposed site kWh. And all the information on the screen is pulled from the Quick Start Guide for the 2019 CBEC Res software. So here we just moved to the battery tab instead of the EDR PV tab. So bypassing the PV size limit, which is the checkbox over on the right, it allows users to get full EDR credit, but it may violate net energy metering sizing rules. Users are advised to contact local utility to ensure compliance with PV sizing rules. We also have a field here for the total rated battery capacity where you can enter in the battery capacity you're looking at installing. And they have another checkbox for the take the self-utilization credit. And this is interesting. It actually allows the user to get an efficiency credit for the installation of the battery. So a lot of the battery compliance, it goes directly into the battery EDR. But by checking this box, you actually get an efficiency credit, which goes towards the efficiency of the building. I did not see an explicit explanation of this, but to take an educated guess, I believe that this is because you're generating on-site energy, you're storing it on-site, and you're consuming it on-site because you have the battery storage, and thus you're eliminating the inherent inefficiencies and transmission and distribution losses that the electricity takes from the power plant to get into your home for consumption. So battery size, the battery allows the size of the PV array to be reduced by 25% with the installation of a 7.5 kilowatt battery system, and there are 3 battery control options here. I was unable to take a screenshot with the drop down so you could see all of them, but I'll go ahead and read through what the different options are. So the first one is basic, which you can see selected here, where the battery charges whenever there is excess PV. The battery discharges to meet the house load when not covered by PV. And in the basic control, the battery does not put power into the grid. Time of use is another control option. The battery charges whenever there is excess PV. During peak summer months, battery discharges at the beginning of the peak period. That varies by climate zone at the max rate until fully discharged. And during non-peak summer months, the battery operates as basic. And the third and final control option is advanced DR controls. With this control option, it knows peak day and peak hour, and it uses PV to charge battery and discharge at the maximum rate during the highest TDV hours. Otherwise, battery runs on basic. And in this option, battery can put power into the grid after meeting a house load. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and try and speed along here. I'm almost done. So here we have an EDR example, and this is a screenshot of results where you can see the EDR scores. So up at the top, you see like the subsequent 6 fields. The top 3 is the equation for the standard efficiency. So you have the EDR of standard efficiency and this climate zone for this size of house is 43.6 minus the EDR of standard design PV, which is 19.3, and that produces a final standard design EDR of 24.5. And for this particular project, the proposed efficiency is 39.6. The EDR of proposed PV is 23.0, and that yields a final proposed EDR of 16.6. And here, the proposed efficiency and the final EDR is less than the standard efficiency and the standard final EDR, and thus the project qualifies. It complies with the code. If you notice, there's a plus flexibility for the EDR of the proposed PV, and that is referring to demand response capabilities.
Yes, great. We have another question from Barbie. She's asking if it's possible that a larger credit might be allowed for a larger battery system. She's saying that the smallest capacity Powerwall 2 is 13.5 kW, which would provide nearly double the storage capacity to support many homes. So does that add to the, do you get a larger credit for a larger system for a battery?
So they just specify the 7.5 here. I want to go ahead and go back to this. So I know that for the 7.5, that yes, it would, but there are, as I mentioned, there are restraints around net metering. So I would recommend checking with your utility and making sure that that is acceptable. But yes. Cool. Any other questions?
None at the moment.
Wonderful. Okay, so I think that wraps it up for my end, and Pearl, I'll pass it back to you.
Great. So recently we made some additions to the 2018 program. So I thought it would be valuable to just quickly go over the additional kickers. We just primarily wanted to include it in the slide deck. I know most of our participants are familiar with the program, so I won't spend much time on that. Just to give you an overview, CAHP is our single family homes program and CMFNH is multifamily. The projects that come in through these programs need to be permitted to the 2016 Title 24 code. So we're still talking about the previous, the current code cycle as opposed to the rest of our presentation, which was about the next code. Just to go over the new cash kickers that we added, we have a new QII kicker, which would provide additional $400 as a cash incentive for any project that takes that. Also, we have tiered incentives for single-family homes projects under CAHP for reduced building air leakage, so a tighter envelope. The incentives start at $100 per lot and go on to $300 for the tightest home that we have in our tiered approach, which is 1 ACH 50. For CMFNH, the project again needs to be permitted to 2016 Title 24 standards. We added the QII kicker also to low-rise multifamily projects. So any project that does that would qualify for a $45 per unit incentive. And the kicker tables are available in your slide deck. I know I practically just rushed through them. We were just running out of time. But we wanted to make these available for any projects that would want to participate in the current code cycle. With that, I think we just got another comment on making the table 150.1 available for 2019 code, and thank you for that. We will make it a point to add that to the slide deck email that we send out to our participants right after the webinar. And that brings us to the very end of our presentation. Thank you for joining us today. For any questions and inquiries regarding the CAHP or the CMFNH program, please feel free to reach out to us on the email ID provided on the slide, rnc@arcsolutions.com. More information about the programs is on our websites. The links will be made available with the slide deck. And for any specific questions about the content of the webinar, please feel free to reach out to Nolan on the email given below or to Ritesh or myself. We'd be happy to answer any more questions. Thank you again, everybody, for joining.
Thank you very much. I appreciated all your questions, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day.
Great. Thank you.